The unexpected visitor. The wheat field stretched endlessly under the late afternoon sun, golden stalks swaying like ocean waves in the gentle breeze. Marcus wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he knelt beside his tomato vines, carefully plucking the ripest fruit with hands that showed years of honest labor. His small farm sat on the edge of nowhere, exactly where he wanted it, far from the galactic trade routes, far from the war, far from his past. "Got to say," came a voice like grinding metal and distant thunder, "I never took you for the charitable type." Marcus didn't jump. Years of combat training had taught him to control his reactions, even when a massive shadow fell across his vegetable patch. He turned slowly, unsurprised to see the source of the voice lounging against his weathered barn. The dragon was unlike anything most civilians had ever seen, one of the legendary Drakari, the bioengineered war beasts that had terrorized battlefields across 3 star systems. This one bore the scars of countless battles, dulled scales along his spine, a missing claw on his left front foot, and eyes that held the weight of too many memories. Yet something about his posture suggested his fighting days were long behind him. "I'm not being charitable," Marcus replied, standing and dusting soil from his hands. "You just looked hungry." The dragon snorted, hot air shimmering around his nostrils. "You assume a lot, farmer." "You assume I assume a lot," Marcus shot back with a tired smile. "Touché." For a moment, they simply regarded each other, the retired soldier turned farmer and the battle-scarred war beast. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You got a name?" The dragon's tail flicked, accidentally knocking over a basket of potatoes. "Had one once. No point using it anymore. The war's over, my unit's dead." "All right then," Marcus said, already walking toward his barn. "I'll call you Ash." "Creative," the dragon rumbled, but there was no malice in it. Marcus paused at the barn door. "You eat vegetables?" "Why, you offering?" "You eat meat, I shoot you." For the first time, the dragon's scarred muzzle twisted into what might have been a smile. "I'll take the vegetables." Marcus disappeared into the cool darkness of his barn, emerging moments later with a woven basket filled with fresh produce, tomatoes still warm from the sun, a head of cabbage, some bread he'd baked that morning, and a few root vegetables. He set it down in front of Ash, who stared at the offering like it was some alien artifact. "You're really going to feed me?" Ash murmured, more statement than question. Marcus leaned against the barn, arms crossed. "You look like you need it. Call it self-preservation. If you die on my land, I'll have to dig a hole big enough to bury you, and I hate digging." Ash picked up the loaf of bread delicately between 2 claws, examining it with an almost childlike curiosity. "Been a while since anyone handed me something that wasn't a weapon." Marcus said nothing, but something in his chest loosened as he watched the dragon tear off a piece of bread and chew it thoughtfully. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from his past, he was just sharing a meal with an unlikely guest. As the sun set behind the wheat fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, neither of them suspected that their simple act of kindness would soon bring their peaceful world crashing down around them. An uneasy peace. 3 days had passed since Ash first appeared at the farm, and what had started as a single shared meal had somehow become routine. Each morning, Marcus would find the dragon sprawled in the shade of the old oak tree behind the barn, and each evening, he'd bring out a basket of food. "You sure this isn't poisoned?" Ash asked for the 3rd time, delicately peeling apart a piece of bread as if it might explode. Marcus rolled his eyes from his seat on an overturned crate, sipping coffee from a dented tin cup. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead." "Fair point." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky shifted from blue to deep orange. The war had taken different things from each of them. Marcus had lost his faith in the cause he'd once served, while Ash had lost his purpose entirely. But here, in this quiet corner of the galaxy, those losses seemed less important than the simple act of sharing a meal. "Why'd you really stop?" Ash asked suddenly. Marcus paused, cup halfway to his lips. "Stop what?" "Soldiering. Fighting. Whatever you did before this." Ash gestured with a claw toward the modest farm. Nobody retires to the middle of nowhere without a reason. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the wheat sway in the evening breeze. Same reason you're here instead of wherever dragons go when they're done being weapons. Which is? Sometimes you see enough blood to know you never want to see any more. Ash nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without need for further words. They'd both crossed lines they couldn't uncross, done things they couldn't undo. The farm was sanctuary for both of them, a place where they could be something other than what the war had made them. The peaceful moment was shattered by the distant rumble of engines. Both of them stiffened simultaneously, years of combat instinct kicking in despite their civilian lives. Marcus set down his cup with steady hands, while Ash's ears pricked forward, tracking the sound with predatory precision. On the horizon, dust clouds were rising from the dirt road that led to the farm, vehicles, multiple vehicles, moving fast and with purpose. Military, Marcus said quietly, recognizing the formation even at this distance. Ash stretched his wings slightly, battle-ready despite his recent domesticity. That's never a good sign. Marcus felt his jaw clench as the lead vehicle came into view, armored transports painted in the familiar black and gold of the Galactic Union. He'd spent years making sure no one could find him out here, had taken every precaution to stay off their radar. What did you do? Marcus asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. Ash gestured toward the half-eaten bread in his claws. Clearly, I accepted food from a farmer. The galaxy's gravest offense. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. Almost. The convoy rolled to a stop just shy of the main barn, engines cooling with metallic ticks in the evening air. Soldiers poured out in precise formation, 20 of them at least, all wearing standard-issue combat armor and carrying weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls. And then, stepping out of the lead transport like he owned the place, came the last person Marcus had ever wanted to see again. General Aldrin Voss looked exactly the same as he had 5 years ago during the tribunal, cold gray eyes, perfectly pressed uniform, and the kind of smile that suggested he knew secrets you'd kill to keep hidden. He was a legend in military circles, a hero to some, a war criminal to others. To Marcus, he was simply the reason he'd turned his back on everything he'd once believed in. Farmer, Voss said, his voice carrying easily across the farmyard. Marcus stood slowly, not bothering to hide the distaste in his voice. General. Voss's gaze shifted past him to Ash, who remained seated but had gone very, very still. Something predatory flickered behind the general's eyes. Well, Voss murmured, this is interesting. Marcus felt the air grow heavy with unspoken threats. Whatever peace he and Ash had found here was about to be tested in ways neither of them had expected. Old enemies. You're trespassing, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the 20 weapons now pointed in his general direction. Voss ignored him completely, studying Ash with the calculating expression of a collector who'd found a rare specimen. Didn't think I'd find one of you still breathing. Ash finally spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to make the air vibrate. I get that a lot. The general's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Funny. You know there's a pretty hefty bounty on your kind, dead or alive, though dead is considerably easier to transport. Marcus took a step forward, placing himself between Voss and the dragon. He's not your problem. No. Voss arched an eyebrow. Because it looks like my problem is sitting on your land, eating your food, and existing in violation of about 12 different interstellar accords. Those accords were written by the same people who created the Drakari in the first place, Marcus shot back. Bit hypocritical, don't you think? Voss's expression darkened. Careful, Marcus. Your pacifist phase is showing. The use of his real name sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He'd changed his identity, buried his records, done everything possible to disappear. The fact that Voss had found him meant someone had been looking hard. What do you want? Marcus asked. Justice, Voss replied simply. This creature is a weapon of mass destruction. The fact that it's currently playing house with a disgraced ex-soldier doesn't change what it is. Ash rose to his full height then, and several soldiers took involuntary steps backward. Even wounded and weary, the dragon was an imposing sight, 12 feet of scales, claws, and barely contained lethality. The basket of bread fell over as he stood, spilling its contents across the dirt. Weapon of mass destruction, Ash repeated thoughtfully. Is that what they're calling us now? I thought the official term was regrettable necessity. Semantics, Voss said, but his hand moved to the plasma pistol at his hip. History, Ash corrected. Your people made us, trained us, sent us to die on a dozen different worlds. And now that the war's over, we're suddenly the monsters. You were always monsters, Voss said coldly. We just pointed you in the right direction. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Marcus could see the calculation in Ash's eyes, how many soldiers he could take before they brought him down, which direction offered the best cover, whether Marcus would be caught in the crossfire. It was the look of a predator backed into a corner, and it terrified him. Nobody has to die here, Marcus said quickly. This is just a misunderstanding. Oh, I think we understand each other perfectly, Voss replied. He gestured to his soldiers, who raised their weapons in unison. Marcus Chen, former captain of the 47th Planetary Assault Division, you are under arrest for harboring a Class A war criminal and violating the Sentient Weapons Control Act. Marcus felt his heart sink. They knew everything, his real name, his service record, probably even why he'd left the military in the first place. There would be no talking their way out of this. Guess I was right, Ash rumbled, his voice carrying a note of dark amusement. Never a good sign when the military shows up. Let's not do anything stupid, Voss warned, but his smile suggested he was hoping for exactly that. Marcus looked at Ash, seeing the resignation in the dragon's ancient eyes. They both knew how this would end. Ash would fight, the soldiers would kill him, and Marcus would disappear into a military prison for the rest of his life. It was a neat, tidy conclusion to their brief friendship. But as the sun set behind them, painting the wheat fields in shades of blood and gold, Marcus realized he was tired of neat, tidy conclusions. He was tired of running, tired of hiding, and most of all, tired of letting good people, or dragons, pay for his mistakes. You know what, General? Marcus said, his hand moving slowly toward the plasma knife at his belt. I think I'm done being stupid. The farmyard erupted into chaos. The battle for peace. The first shot came from Marcus's plasma knife as he dove behind a water trough, the brilliant blue bolt searing past Voss's ear and melting a hole through the transport's hull. The general cursed and scrambled for cover as his soldiers opened fire, their energy weapons turning the peaceful farmyard into a war zone. Ash moved like liquid death despite his age and injuries. His massive form rolled behind the barn as plasma bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. Years of retirement hadn't dulled his combat instincts, if anything, the peaceful interlude had given him something worth fighting for. I told you this was a bad idea. Marcus shouted over the din of weapons fire, pressing his back against the metal trough as energy bolts sparked off its surface. You told me a lot of things. Ash roared back, his voice carrying from somewhere behind the barn. Most of them involved vegetables. A soldier rounded the corner of Marcus's cover, rifle raised, but the farmer was faster. 20 years of combat experience kicked in as he swept the man's legs and sent him sprawling, the rifle spinning away across the dirt. Another soldier appeared, then another, but Marcus was already moving, using every piece of farm equipment as cover. Ash emerged from behind the barn like a force of nature. His claws raked across the nearest transport, tearing through armor plating like paper. Soldiers scattered, their weapons ineffective at close range against the dragon's natural armor. But there were too many of them, and more transports were arriving on the horizon. We can't win this. Marcus called out, ducking as another volley of plasma fire lit up the evening sky. Winning was never the point. Ash replied, his tail sweeping 3 soldiers off their feet. Sometimes you fight just to show them it isn't easy. Voss had taken cover behind his command vehicle, barking orders into his communicator. "Bring up the heavy weapons. I want that thing brought down now." Marcus saw the soldiers wheeling out a massive plasma cannon, the kind designed to punch through starship hulls. One shot from that would end Ash instantly, no matter how tough his scales were. The farmer made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of seeking better cover, he broke from behind the trough and sprinted directly at Voss's position, plasma knife blazing in his hand. "Marcus!" Ash roared, seeing the suicidal charge. But Marcus had spotted something the dragon couldn't see from his position, the general's personal communicator, still connected to the fleet command. The same arrogance that had brought Voss here might be their salvation. Marcus tackled the general, both men rolling across the dirt in a tangle of limbs and curses. Voss was younger and stronger, but Marcus fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. His knife slashed across the general's arm, drawing blood and a stream of profanity. "You always were a idealistic fool." Voss snarled, landing a punch that split Marcus's lip. "Better than being a soulless bastard." Marcus shot back, grabbing for the communicator. His fingers closed around the device just as Voss's pistol pressed against his ribs. Time seemed to slow as Marcus looked into the general's cold eyes, seeing his own death reflected there. But the shot never came. Ash's massive claw closed around Voss like a cage, lifting the general off Marcus with almost casual ease. The dragon's eyes blazed with an inner fire that spoke of barely contained fury. "You want to talk about monsters?" Ash growled, his voice like grinding stone. "Let me tell you about monsters. Monsters are the ones who create weapons out of living beings and then discard them when they're no longer useful. Monsters are the ones who destroy entire worlds and call it necessary. Monsters are the ones who hunt down those who just want to be left in peace." Voss struggled in the dragon's grip, his face turning red. You're proving my point." "No," Ash said quietly, setting the general down with surprising gentleness. "I'm proving his." He nodded toward Marcus, who was clutching the communicator with shaking hands. Marcus looked at the device, knowing he had one chance to end this before more ships arrived. He activated the broadcast function, his voice carrying to every military vessel in the system. "This is former Captain Marcus Chen," he said, his words steady despite the chaos around them. "I'm transmitting from coordinates you already have. General Voss has engaged in an illegal military action against civilians on a neutral world. I'm invoking Article 12 of the Military Justice Code. Any officer who uses military assets for personal vendettas is subject to immediate court-martial." The farmyard fell silent except for the crackle of cooling weapons and the distant hum of transport engines. Every soldier could hear the transmission, and every officer in the fleet would be required to respond. Voss's face went white. "You don't have the authority." "I have a battlefield commission that was never revoked," Marcus interrupted, "and 20 witnesses to an illegal action." "Your move, General." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the wheat fields. Then, from the communicator, came a crisp voice, "This is Admiral Morrison, Fleet Command. General Voss, you are ordered to stand down immediately and report for debriefing." The fight was over. But as Marcus looked at the destruction around his peaceful farm, he knew their real battle was just beginning. The price of freedom. The inquiry took 3 days. 3 days of testimony, depositions, and the kind of bureaucratic theater that Marcus had hoped never to see again. Ash waited in a temporary holding area, not a cell, exactly, but not freedom either, while lawyers and politicians decided his fate. Marcus sat in the witness chair for the 3rd time, facing a panel of admirals and civilian oversight officials. The questions were always the same: how long had he harbored the dragon? What was their relationship? Did he understand the legal implications of his actions? The defendant creature was part of the Drakari project, Admiral Morrison said, reading from a tablet. Created specifically for military purposes, enhanced for combat effectiveness, and classified as a controlled weapon under interstellar law. The defendant creature has a name, Marcus replied evenly. And he's been living peacefully for over a year without incident. Until General Voss arrived with a military force, added Commander Sarah Walsh, the military prosecutor assigned to the case. Unlike many of her colleagues, she seemed genuinely interested in justice rather than politics. According to testimony, the dragon made no aggressive moves until fired upon. Admiral Morrison nodded reluctantly. Nevertheless, the law is clear. Drakari are classified as weapons, not citizens. They cannot simply be retired. Marcus leaned forward. With respect, Admiral, that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this mess in the first place. You created living beings to fight your war, and now that the war's over, you want to dispose of them like broken equipment. The Drakari were never intended to be permanent, Morrison said stiffly. Tell that to Ash. The hearing dragged on, but Marcus could see the tide turning. Voss's unauthorized assault had been a public relations disaster for the military. The footage of soldiers attacking a peaceful farm had spread across the galactic networks, and public opinion was shifting toward sympathy for both the reformed dragon and the farmer who stood up to tyranny. On the final day, they brought Ash into the hearing room. He moved carefully, mindful of the civilians who flinched at his presence, and settled onto a reinforced platform designed for his size. Despite everything, he maintained his dignity. State your designation for the record, Admiral Morrison said. I don't have one anymore, Ash replied calmly. My unit designation was terminated when the war ended. My personal name is irrelevant to these proceedings. The farmer calls me Ash, and that's sufficient. Do you understand the charges against you? I understand that I'm being charged with existing. A murmur ran through the gallery. Walsh suppressed what might have been a smile. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Morrison asked. Ash was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes surveying the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. I was created to be a weapon, he said. I spent 15 years being pointed at your enemies and told to destroy them. I was good at it, better than you expected, probably better than you wanted. But when the war ended, I didn't disappear. I didn't conveniently die on some battlefield. I survived, and I had to figure out what that meant. He paused, looking directly at Marcus in the witness section. For the first time in my existence, someone offered me food without expecting me to kill for it. Someone showed me kindness without wanting anything in return. That farmer taught me that I could be something other than what you made me to be. I could be myself. The room was completely silent. If that makes me a criminal, Ash continued, then I suppose I'm guilty as charged. But I won't apologize for choosing peace over war, or friendship over solitude. And I won't apologize for defending the only person who ever saw me as more than just a weapon. Admiral Morrison cleared his throat. The panel will deliberate. They were back within an hour. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, Morrison announced, this panel finds that while the defendant Ash is technically in violation of the Sentient Weapons Control Act, the circumstances of this case warrant special consideration. Marcus held his breath. The defendant has demonstrated no aggressive behavior except in self-defense. His integration into civilian life has been peaceful and productive. Furthermore, the military action that precipitated this incident was unauthorized and excessive. Morrison looked directly at Ash. Therefore, this panel recommends that you be granted special civilian status, contingent upon regular check-ins with local authorities and continued peaceful behavior. You will be free to remain on the farm, under the sponsorship of Marcus Chen. The gallery erupted in cheers and protests in equal measure. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Ash simply nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. Later, as they walked back across the wheat fields toward the damaged but still standing farm, Ash spoke quietly. So what happens now? Marcus looked at the setting sun painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson. Now we go home. We fix what can be fixed, and we learn to live with what can't be. And if they come back? Marcus smiled, remembering the weight of his plasma knife and the feel of fighting alongside a friend. Then we'll deal with it together. They walked in comfortable silence through the wheat that swayed like a golden ocean in the evening breeze. Behind them, the last of the military transports disappeared over the horizon. Ahead lay the simple promise of another shared meal, another quiet evening, and the radical notion that sometimes the greatest victory was simply being allowed to exist in peace. As they reached the farmhouse, Marcus pulled out a loaf of bread from his pack, somehow saved from the chaos of the past few days. He broke it in half and offered a piece to his friend. "You sure this isn't poisoned?" Ash asked, but he was smiling. "If I wanted you dead," Marcus replied, settling onto his old crate, "you'd be dead." The dragon chuckled, a sound like distant thunder on a summer evening. For the first time in days, everything felt right with the world. The end.